talk a little Bama football and Rodney National Signing Day 2020. Both December and the February version are in the books. So the 2020 recruiting class is basically in the books. This past Wednesday, though, Alabama went in with 3 prospects that they had offers out to that I think they were hoping to sign at least 1 or 2 of those guys, and that being McKinley Jackson, the defensive tackle from Lucedale, Mississippi, who signed with Texas A&M, Enos Rakestraw, the quarterback from Texas, who inked with Missouri, and Cedric Von Prawn, the center from New Orleans, who stayed with his commitment to Georgia. So by that math, and Nick Saban's got different math, as we heard last Wednesday, but by that math, Alabama went 0-3 on signing day.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, they recruited Cedric Van Pran. Obviously, he was already committed to Georgia. I don't think anyone ever really expected him to flip. So, I mean, you recruit a lot of guys, and and hopefully maybe you get a guy who, in a situation like that, you have a great opportunity to flip him. I don't think that was ever the case with Cedric Van Pran, to be honest with you. As far as Rakestraw was concerned, I think he was a good prospect. I think, Alabama could possibly taken him if they had a spot and if they felt like they had a spot open for him. But again, he had a great relationship with the defense coordinator at Missouri, Brian Walters. And, I'm not going to say that I know everything about his recruitment. I think he was a solid prospect. I don't think he was a great prospect. A great kid, has some skills, but I'd never really saw him as a great prospect. As far as McKinley Jackson's concerned, yes, I think this was all about McKinley Jackson in terms of the guy that was the top target, I would say, in this late recruiting period. He was a guy that Alabama certainly wanted. Texas A&M just did a really good job. And, Gary, the bottom line is when you recruit great players like McKinley Jackson, you're not going to get them all. Alabama got their fair share this year, but they didn't get McKinley Jackson.
Alabama did announce the signings of those players that had previously been committed but did not sign, or at least did not announce their signing during the early period. That, of course, being the McEachern High School teammates in Powder Springs, Georgia, Javon Baker, the wide receiver, Jamel Burrows, the defensive tackle, and then from out in Houston, Texas, Damian George, the big offensive tackle. So they sewed up those 3 verbal commitments. What do you think of those 3 guys?
Well, I like Jamel Burrows as a defensive lineman. I think he had a great sophomore year. He looked like he was a guy that was ticketed to be a 5-star type prospect, I think, back when he was early in his high school career. And then he got a little bit heavy as a junior, did not have quite the same year that he had as a sophomore. But he bounced back this year, had a tremendous year, I thought. His highlight tape looks really good. He's a big guy. Obviously, he's 320 pounds or so. And I think once he gets here in Scott Cochran program, he's got a chance to be a really good defensive lineman, a solid guy, very athletic. So I like his addition, and I like Javon Baker, his teammate, is maybe not the fastest guy, Gary, in terms of just pure speed, but he is a physical, tall kid, but very athletic, can go up and get the ball. He's a guy that will bring some size to that wide receiver room, and I think that's certainly something Alabama needed. As far as Damian George is concerned, the offensive tackle out of Galena Park, North Shore, which is in the Houston area, 6'6", 340. He's 16. He just turned 17 in December. Guy that's really still maturing, growing, developing in terms of his coordination, catching up with his body, and I think he's got a chance to be really good in time. He's got a really powerful punch, really strong kid, and I think his feet are improving.
Do you think it's over? Do you think that there is a chance that Alabama might add another player between now and the fall, or another transfer? Or do you think basically, of course, you got the Tucker, the transfer tight end, coming in from North Carolina? Do you think they're basically done, or do you think there's still something that could be happening down the road?
Well, it would not surprise me if they found a player that they like in the grad transfer portal or the transfer portal. My understanding is they would really, if they found a safety that they felt like could come in and play and be a strong contributor next year, that they would go that route if they found someone that was in the transfer portal or as a grad transfer. So, we'll see what happens, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility of adding a player.
Tighter Insider TV. When you look at this 2020 class, and I know you don't rank classes, but when you look at this class and you've broken it down, I know commitment by commitment or signee by signee now. What do you think of it?
I think it's a great class. I think anytime you get a franchise quarterback like Bryce Young, that's a great start. I mean, you look at some of the other really good recruiting classes. I know Georgia got a grad transfer quarterback, and they're supposed to be the number one recruiting class if you pay attention to the rankings. And to me, they didn't get a difference maker at quarterback, and Alabama did. And I think that sometimes can separate a class. But Alabama did extremely well at running back, added 3 outstanding players. We've talked about Jason McClellan and Roydell Williams and Kyle Edwards. Those are 3 outstanding backs. I think on the defensive side is where Alabama really struck gold. Timothy Smith up front's a 5-star defensive lineman. And you add him and Burrows and Jamarian Latham, who's got the ability to play both sides. Could play offense, could play defense, but you had those to what they had last year, that great recruiting class they had on the defensive line last year, and then these linebackers that they got, Gary, this might be one of the best linebacker classes Alabama's ever brought in terms of just looking at them coming in, on paper, but just very, very athletic. You're talking about a guy like Quandarius Robinson, Drew Sanders, Will Anderson, Demoy Kennedy, to me, and Chris Braswell, those are all 5-star talent type players. It's just amazing. And even Jackson Bratton, it's a guy that's probably underrated a little bit by some people. He's got a chance on the inside to be a really outstanding player. So I look at that, and then I look at them bringing in Ronald Williams in the secondary as a corner. The JUCO player, probably the number 1 JUCO corner in the country. And I really like Brian Branch as a safety. Brian Branch is just a great football player. He can do a lot of different things. He was a tremendous high school receiver as well, very productive in that regard, but also as a kick returner. He's a guy that would not surprise me eventually if he stepped in when Jalen Waddle's gone eventually and becomes that guy that returns punts. But just an outstanding player. I really like Brian Branch.
Now we get to this upcoming season. It's everything's settled in now. The recruiting period is over and getting ready for spring ball and kind of, it's 2020 now. 2019 is in the rearview mirror. Having said that, Rodney, it's a rare season in which Alabama didn't really reach any of its goals. Didn't make it to Atlanta, didn't win a division, didn't win a conference championship, didn't make it to the playoff, didn't win a national championship. So a lot of reasons for that, mainly the injuries, we know that. But when you're coming off, by Alabama standards, a disappointing season, and we've discussed this before, what's more difficult, coming off a season where you reach all your goals and you have to follow it up, or coming off a season when you didn't reach your goals and turnover in the roster again? Just your early thoughts, as I know we're several months away, but for this team for 2020, what kind of potential do you think it has?
Well, I think it's, you can see certainly a lot of strengths there when you look on the offensive side of the ball. You do lose Tua, obviously, the best quarterback I've seen here in 50 years. And you lose him. And anytime you lose a guy like that, it's a great loss. But at the same time, we saw a lot of promise from Mac Jones, in my opinion. I mean, he's got a lot of leadership. He executed the offense well. He made throws. He did well in really difficult environment down there at Auburn, in my opinion. I know he threw the 2 interceptions, but you're talking about a guy with limited experience. I thought he did extremely well. You've got some young quarterbacks that are going to compete. We know about Talia and Paul Tyson, and we've also talked at length about Bryce Young, his potential. He may be the next great one here. We'll see. But so they've got some talent there at that spot, and I really love the offensive line. I think it has a chance to be a tremendous offensive line. Going to be interesting to see who they plug in at the, that spot with Jedrick Wills, how they kind of form this offensive line. I really like Darian Dalcourt, Emil Ekiyor, guys that have been interior players, but what they might bring is maybe perhaps you see Dalcourt slide in as the center and move Dickerson back to guard and, find you a right tackle, whoever that is, if it's Evan Neal, however they do it, Gary, they've got a lot of options up front, and I think they're going to be strong. I think the question is, I think we all know this, is, how much improvement do they make on the defensive side of the ball? I think it's really difficult these days to stop these new explosive offenses. You look at what LSU did to put up, nearly 600 yards or around 600 yards on Clemson, Brent Venables. So it's really hard to stop these offenses these days. But I do think Alabama needs to get a lot better defensively, and I think that's the key. Is how much improvement can Alabama make on the defensive side? Hopefully Dylan Moses is back to being Dylan Moses, and they can find some guys to plug in on the outside. Chris Allen, King Makuta, Jerez Park, some of these younger guys that have been around, even Kevin Harris, and the ones that are coming in that are here now that just came in as freshmen. Hopefully, they can find some guys in those spots and just improve defensively. And we've talked about it repeatedly, Gary. I mean, the tackling on the defensive side, especially the corners and on the edge, was not very good. And those are just things that I think that they really have to shore up.
Before you go, change gears. Softball got started over the weekend, Friday and Saturday down in Tallahassee, and did not start out the way that we expected or hoped, with a team ranked number 1 or number 2 in all the preseason polls. They lost 3 of 4. 2 just complete late-game collapses, one against Florida State, one against North Carolina. I had somebody text me, it reminded him of the 2000 football season, and I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but we remember Alabama coming off the 99 season, was preseason top 3, went to UCLA, got beat, and it never recovered. But I guess it is a reminder that in sports, nothing's guaranteed, and all the preseason hype in the world does not matter. When you go out there to compete, you have to prove it, and it's very, very early. But what did you make of the disappointing start for softball?
Well, I think, first of all, it always concerns you. I know it does me when you get all this hype that you're expected to be so good, and then if you don't come out of the gate quickly, you're a disappointment. And I don't think it's necessarily that at all. I mean, again, it's a long season where they play 60-something games. I mean, so I'm not really going to get caught up on what happened now, but you do want to get off to a good start because you want to have momentum. You want to be you certainly want to be a team that builds and continues to get better, I think, throughout the season. But again, it's early. I know they had those losses you're talking about. People were upset over the weekend, but again, Patrick Murphy, he's been here a long time. He's had a lot of success. Obviously, he's been in a lot of different situations. He knows how to bring a team along, and I have no doubt that with the players that they have and with his experience in developing a team, that this is going to still be an outstanding softball team.
Well, this is the time of the year, not that it's not always interesting on Tighter Insider, because it is, but this is a real interesting time. Because football is always going to be talked about. Softball's cranked up. Baseball starts on Friday. Basketball's getting ready for the stretch run. A lot of topics circulating out there at TighterInsider.com.
There really is, Gary. And let me say this, too, real quick about this softball. You can use this as a positive.
Sure.
This is certainly, when you lose these 3 out of the first 4, you don't think that Patrick Murphy can use this and say, hey, look, it doesn't matter what people say about us. They may give us this number 1 ranking. We may have all the press clippings. So certainly I think he can use this as a positive to bring his team along and get their attention. But, yeah, TighterInsider.com, it's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card if you prefer. There's an address there to send a check. And, gives you all the premium stuff, but also the forum, Gary, where there's a lot of discussion and talk. And, you know, before you know it, spring practice will be here, and it's going to be really exciting watching how this team develops and once that spring practice starts.
No doubt about it. Check it out at TiderInsider.com. Thanks, Rodney.
All right, buddy. Thank you.